Good afternoon. We are continuing our discussion on Frank B. Wilderson, this time focusing on The Narcissistic Slave, which is an essay that is published in the book Red, White, and Black, published in 2010. But before that, I would like to give you last minute tips for your essay that you will submit next week. And after, I will review very briefly Lacan's mirror stage because it is useful to understand Wilderson's ideas. And then we will move on to Fanon and his notion of collective catharsis. And after that, we will finish with the narcissistic slave. And of course, we finish the class with a discussion. I just would like to remind you that in the introduction, you state your position, because in some essays, I have seen that people proceed by saying, I will, oh my God, I will do that, and then I will give you my personal opinion. No, you don't, it's not, your personal opinion is not something that you reveal at the end. It's something that you say right at the beginning. So I will explain briefly Wilderson's ideas, and then I will defend that Wilderson is wrong when he says that violence is the solution. And you say that in the introduction, because for some people, it is, I have to say also that it is hard to know what is your introduction and what is your development. It's hard to see where the introduction finished. So please make sure that it's clear. Also, when you are in the arguments, the development, do not use your personal stories as an argument. First of all, you should not talk about yourself that much, and especially not personal dramas in your story. You don't want to look like someone who is manipulating his audience with their feeling, emotions. You just operate with logic. And in the conclusion, it's really minimal, but please avoid stating obvious statements like Fanon remains relevant today, Wilderson remains relevant, because it's obvious that they are relevant since we are doing a course on them. So what you want to do is you want to, at the end of the essay, you provide maybe an alternative solutions, something other than violence, for example. And then you encourage researcher academics to further studies, to provide further studies on that alternative solutions. That would be a more appropriate way to finish your essay. And also, as I mentioned last week, if you see that you will not be able to make it for November 30, because, for example, you have so many other deadlines around that date, what I suggest is that you talk to me so we can find a solution together in order for you to do not get late penalty points. But it is important that when you email me, you say where you are in your essay. I wrote my first idea. I wrote the introduction. But I know that because I have exams, I will not be able to make it. And I know I will be able to finish on December 1st. So this is clear because I know where you are and I know when you plan to finish. And then I can provide a positive answer to your request. What you don't want to do is just say, I need more time, because I don't know what more time means to you. It's too vague. And so that forced me to go with you into a back and forth. Okay, 24 hours is enough. And now you say, no, it's not enough. So I don't know. I don't know. And I don't have the time to do back and forth. So you say when you are ready. You say you are ready for December 1st. It's okay. So tell me, but but if something happens after the deadline, I'm not in the obligation of providing you more delays, because you already had more than 4 weeks to write 6 pages, which is a lot, even in undergraduate standards. When I was undergraduate, I had 2 weeks to write 8 pages. And finally, yes, I would like to say that it's important to not use data against Wilderson. You want to use your logic. You can put pressure on his assumption, his theoretical frameworks, his reasoning, whether the arguments flow or not. But what you don't do is looking for data that contradict his conclusions, because we are not doing interpretation of data in this course. We are at the conceptual level. So you really want to engage with the text itself. You read the text often until you are sick of it, and then you will see how you can attack Wilderson. This is the only way. So now, if there are no questions, I will now move on to Lacan. This is something I discussed few weeks ago. It's just a reminder. So, mirror stage. This conceptual framework was used by Fanon in the lived experience of the Black man. Fanon engaged with Lacan's text, and Wilderson too. So this is important. So mirror stage, you have a baby who has this symbiotic relationship with his mother. So the baby does not see the difference between his body and the body of his mother. He does not have to talk to communicate that he is hungry or tired or thirsty. Something magical happens when he is hungry. The milk is coming. So this is a symbiotic relationship with the mother. And because the human species brain is not completely developed when they enter into the world, they really need another person to help them grow. as opposed to other species who became independent very quickly. But the problem with this symbiotic relationship is the interference of the father. The father is the obstacle between the baby and the mother. The father is that third person who takes the baby in front of the mirror. Oui. Merci. Front of the baby, who takes the baby in front of the mirror and say, "This is you." So the father gives the name and a name to a baby, and the baby is supposed to identify with this name, which is provided by the father. So he takes the name of the father, and he has to identify with this external object. So he has to believe that this is him. So the advantage with this relationship with the father is that it comes with the unification of the self, because before that, the baby has just a fragmented perception of himself that comes from every part of his body. But now, okay, he has this body, is one person, but the cost of that identification is an alienation, because he does not rely anymore just on the information that come into his body. He has to rely on the information that comes from the word, but with the intermediary, the barrier of the language. He has to enter into this world of language. The reality is not directly accessible to him. It is mediated by language. So this is an alienation, because he has to, instead of relying with his senses, he has to rely on symbols, signs that refer to one another. So you are lost in this world of symbols. And if you are not able to solve this mirror stage, then you develop a neurosis, because a neurosis is a mechanism that is developed by the brain to prevent the discomfort of anxiety. And then you have this notion of collective catharsis. Collective catharsis is related to the mirror stage because it is a solution. Because of the sacrifices that the subject has to do to enter into this world, he has ambivalent feelings toward his father. He hates his father because his father forced him to alienate himself. So the father is just an archetype. That means not just the biological father, but also institutions, education, government. So all of this is father figure. So you have this love that you want to identify with the father because he gave you a name, but you hate your father. But you cannot express this anger, this hate that you feel toward your father. So now you have collective catharsis, and it's a channel and outlet in which you can direct your aggressiveness. And for Fanon, Black people are this outlet. And he concludes that because he sees cartoons like, for example, Mickey Mouse from Disney and Tarzan, in which you see the hero mistreating Black people. And so this is for white people. This is for the entertainment of white people, white kids. So this is entertaining for them to see Black people mistreated. So that's that way the aggressiveness they have originally toward their father, they can direct that toward Black people. So it's satisfying to see Black people suffering, according to Fanon. And then you see that why Black people are chosen to be the object of collective catharsis. It's because in the society, Black men are phobogenic objects. Phobogenic, so they provoke phobia because they are associated with a certain type of sexuality, negative sexuality, coercive sexuality, or non-consensual sexuality, bestial sexuality. So predator. Black man is a predator, so therefore it is justified to be violent towards them. So this is what Fanon thinks, and this is what Afro-pessimists like Frank Wilderson and Jared Sexton thinks. For Wilderson cite Fanon and Sexton, he says, whoever says rape says Black. Whoever says prison says Black. And whoever says AIDS said Black. The Negro is a phobogenic object. Oui. So Wilderson agrees with Fanon that, okay, bye. The violence against Black people is a collective catharsis for white people. Because as we discussed with the mirror stage, you want to preserve the love for your father, but you hate your father. So because you have now collective catharsis, you can still love your father. So you love institutions, so you love culture, you love spirituality. That's what you love about humanity. And everything that you hate about humanity, you can direct this anger towards Black people. So that way the society stays intact. So this is what Afro-pessimists think, Wilderson and David Marriott. What Wilderson added in The Vengeance of Vertigo is that the freedom of Black people is not desirable. For, as we saw in previous texts, white people do not want the freedom of Black people, even when they are allied. So we saw that with junior partners like white women and working class. But it's the same can be said for Black people, because when it comes to their suffering, they suffer from aphasia. So they are not able to communicate the pain because they want to bond with white people in the phobia against Black people. So even though they are not able to connect politically because of the ontology, so Black people are slaves and white people are humans. So it is hard for them to connect politically. But psychically, the Black people try to connect with them with this phobia of Black people. Black people have ambivalent feelings towards white people. They want to connect with them and they want to kill them too. So that's why the Black suffering is really hard to communicate for Black people. And with Vengeance of Vertigo, we saw that Wilderson agrees with BLA, Black Liberation Army, that violence is a good way, a pedagogical way to fight for freedom of the Black people. Because vengeance is not just there to rehabilitate yourself or not there just for vengeance. Violence, what did I say? Violence is not just to rehabilitate yourself or not just for vengeance. Violence is there as a tactic along with non-violent tactics. So violent tactics would be to pose bombs in American institutions, American buildings, but it also to disrupt the order in court. So you have violence combined with non-violence. And it is, according to Wilderson, ethically acceptable if we use a Gramsci perspective. Now, I would like to quickly move on to the Narcissistic Slave, which is an article in which Wilderson defends ideas that you are familiar with. Now it's just saying that humanist discourse is insufficient in explaining the suffering of Black people. As we saw, for example, when we talk about Gramsci discourse, insufficient, colonialist framework, insufficient. So this is the same. Humanist discourse is insufficient because for the same reason, violence towards Black people is structural and gratuitous, cannot be understood with the hegemonic exploitation, alienation vocabulary that you see now in mainstream political philosophy or mainstream political science. So the book is an analysis, an Afro-pessimist analysis of 4 movies from the US, Antoine Fisher, Bush Mama, Skins, and Monster Ball. So we are talking about Black film theories. They used, according to Wilderson, a conceptual framework that came from Jacques Lacan, the psychoanalyst. And therefore, if we want to challenge film theories, for Wilderson, it makes sense to challenge Jacques Lacan himself. And that's what he does in the end of the chapter, but I don't want to discuss this because I do not think it's relevant for this course. But what is the goal of this inquiry is just to create an explanatory, acceptable framework that embrace the Black suffering, that involve Black suffering in the world. So of course, this framework would be an Afro-pessimist framework. And in this text, so Wilderson makes this classification himself. You have a first wave of film theories and second wave of film theories, of Black film theories. So the first wave is interested in the image that is that represent Black people. So they are concerned that Black people are correctly represented in the movies. They want a respectable image of Black people. So you have, for them, you have good image would be a heterosexual Black person, a hardworking person, Black person, and a negative image would be a Black single mother, for example. And you have the second wave that is not really interested in the good or bad image of Black people. They are more interested in emancipatory message or free Black people. So a Black film, so they are interested not only in the story or the narrative, they're interested in mise en scène, acoustic, editing strategies, lighting. And so it's not, and also it's not an identity politics. So a Black film is not necessarily directed by a Black person. That's not the criteria. A Black film is a film that promotes the emancipation of Black people. For Wilderson, obviously, the second wave is better than the first wave, but the second wave is still not right, because the assumption is that it is possible for a Black person to be free or to be an agent or to be a subject, which is in contradiction with what Afro-pessimists think of Black people. For Black people, it's impossible to be a subject. So it's impossible to do a Black movie. It's impossible to be a Black film theorist. And you have to acknowledge that, according to Wilderson. You have to say how it is impossible to be a Black subject unless you exercise a terrifying violence that would transform Black person from a thing to something that we don't know. I think that's all I want to say for today. And Thursday, I will finish discussing with you the narcissistic slave from page 73 to the end. Thank you.